conference has concluded. Questions without notice. The member for Isaacs.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. I refer to a leaked cabinet document from within the Turnbull government marked sensitive and protected. Given the document refers to details of past and future meetings of the National Security Committee of Cabinet, what action has the Prime Minister taken in response to this national security leak, and will the Prime Minister be referring this leak to the Australian Federal Police for investigation?
The Prime
Minister. Mr Speaker, the document concerned is not a cabinet document. It was exchanged between bureaucrats, as my instructions from my officials. It was not a cabinet document as such, in the sense of being before. No, it was marked protected because it was dealing with matters that were to be submitted to cabinet, but was not in fact submitted to cabinet. I understand that the Secretary, Mr Pratt, is conducting an investigation. I can't advise the House whether he has called the Australian Federal Police in to do so, but he certainly should.
The member for Durack. The Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I wish to add to an answer.
Yes, the Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I'm advised that, in fact, shortly before question time, the Secretary of the Department of Social Services, Mr Finn Pratt, did refer the matter that the member for Isaacs asked me about to the Australian Federal Police and asked the Commissioner to accept the matter for investigation.
Thank you. Point of order. The Manager of Opposition Business.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. As I've indicated to the Prime Minister and to you, I just wanted to raise at this point to make sure that the scrutiny of question time is not affected in any way. I wanted to ask for an indication from the government as to what time they now intend to close question time.
Oh, what a joke!
So you're
the Leader of the House. The Leader of the House. Look, I say to both the Leader of the House, the Manager of Opposition Business and the member for McMahon, the Leader of the House will cease interjecting. I'm addressing the House. We've had enough disruption for today. The length of question time is in the hands of the Prime Minister. We've raised this point many times before. That is a matter for the Prime Minister. The practice is very clear. We're going to proceed with question time now. And when no, well, look, you raised a point of order that wasn't a point of order. We'd begun question time again. The Prime Minister's added to an answer. We're going to proceed with question time, and the member for Durack has the. Well, no, the member for Durack, Leader of the Opposition, was asking the question that no one could hear. So I think it would be passing strange for me to not allow the member for Durack to ask her question that was drowned out. I call the member for Durack.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister update the House on the government's achievements, including how our economic reforms are driving jobs and growth? How will the Australian Building and Construction Commission help to improve productivity and reduce construction costs?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for her question. And she understands very well how important the construction and building sector is to Australia. 8% of GDP, 1 million Australians employed, 300,000 small businesses. And this sector, this industry, has been subject to a reign of terror from militant unions, the CFMEU, who have defied the law for years, ever since a Labor government under Bill Shorten, under the Leader of the Opposition as the Minister.
The Prime Minister will resume his seat. The Manager of Opposition Business will resume his seat. The Prime Minister needs to refer to members by their correct titles.
Mr Speaker, point of order.
The Manager of Opposition Business. Manager of Opposition Business. Members on my right. Members on my right. the Manager of Opposition Business
You've
has
just
the
had on interjection the Minister for Immigration do the exact same thing and not calling people by their titles. You either maintain the rules of this place for all members or we don't. And on this day of all days, we should not be letting people get away with it.
The Manager of Opposition Business will resume his seat. Members on both sides will cease interjecting. Now, I'm going to go back to the ruling I made on referring to members by their correct titles, and I'm going to address the House on this subject. If the Manager, and I realise tensions are running high, but I'd ask the Manager of Opposition Business to listen carefully to what I'm saying, because it relates to both the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, and indeed himself and the Leader of the House. At the end of question time, when I had sat members down for not using correct titles, I made a statement, and he will see that that statement refers to a number of aspects about context and the like. There is another element as well that is well established within the practice, and if he wishes, through the course of question time, I can show him the reference, and that is there is special latitude on all matters given to party leaders and, in fact, to managers of opposition business and to the Leader of the House. So in this sense, I've exercised that latitude. I would exercise it in precisely the same way to the Leader of the Opposition, indeed as I have on many occasions, and indeed I did on budget night of this year, where the offences were repeated over and over again. Now, I'm going to ask the Prime Minister to refer to members by their correct titles. The practice makes it very clear that's the case, and it was in my consideration when I made that judgment. And I'm going to ask the Prime Minister to resume his answer and to refer to members by their correct titles.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It was during the Gillard government that the Leader of the Opposition, then the Employment Minister, oversaw the abolition of the Australian Building and Construction Commission. And what we saw, this was done at the behest of the CFMEU. Once again, the Labor Party standing up for the bosses of militant unions, just as they have done again and again and again. Render unto Caesar what is due to Caesar, and it is the absolute obedience of the Labor Party, delivering for Caesar Mellam and all the other Labor leaders who have misused and abused their authority as leaders of trade unions. We are restoring the rule of law to the building and construction sector. We took that pledge to the election, and the Senate has passed the legislation today. Just as it passed the Registered Organisations Bill, just as it passed the legislation to protect the volunteers of the Country Fire Authority from a takeover by another militant union, just as the Senate agreed to abolish the remuneration tribunal that again the Leader of the Opposition set up, in that case to defend the interest of the Transport Workers Union to the disadvantage of tens of thousands of owner-drivers. We stand up for workers, we stand up for families, we stand up for the interests of Australians and Australian taxpayers who are entitled to have a construction sector that complies with the rule of law. Now, I want to thank the Senate leadership team. I want to thank the Minister, Senator Cash, and I particularly want to thank the crossbenchers who supported the legislation, because they had the courage to do what the Labor Party would not, which is to recognise that the rule of law must be extended across our nation. And just as we expect Australians here in this House to comply with the law, as we expect the law to apply in our streets, in our towns, in our schools, so it should apply in that sector of our economy which employs 1 million Australians. This is a great step forward for Australian families, for jobs and growth.
The Leader of the Opposition.
My questions to the Prime Minister. Ever since the government announced the 32.5% backpacker tax in the 2015 budget, it has been mired in complete and utter chaos. Given that the Senate has once again endorsed the sensible compromise of a 10.5% backpacker tax, when will the Prime Minister put policy above politics, take up Labor's offer to deliver this sensible compromise and just clean up this mess?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Oh, that's right. Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition, when he's not pretending to be a champion of the poor and oppressed, when he's not pretending to be a tribune of the people, claims to be standing up for Australian workers, denouncing the horror of foreigners coming to work in Australia, stealing Australian jobs. Oh, his patriotic heart beats so hard, Mr Speaker. But then when it comes to backpackers, all of whom are foreigners, he wants them to pay 10.5% tax. He wants them to pay lower tax than an Australian working in the field alongside them. He wants his message to Australians who want to go to work picking fruit. His message to them is, you're going to pay,
Member
for
for
Sydney,
Sydney,
a marginal rate of tax nearly twice as high as the foreigner from Korea or Taiwan or Norway or Sweden or Germany working next to him. That's his idea of fairness. The hypocrisy of this Leader of the Opposition knows no bounds. He has no regard for consistency. He has no regard for accuracy. He is only concerned with seizing one political opportunity after another. No principle, no integrity, no consistency, no accuracy, no regard for the truth, except there is one truth we all know about this Leader of the Opposition. He will stop at nothing to pursue his own political self-interest.
the member for Dunkley.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer update the House on the government's efforts to arrest the debt, increase wages for hard-working Australians and protect our AAA credit rating? How will the passage of the Australian Building and Construction Commission Bill assist in this endeavour?
The Treasurer has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Dunkley for his question and his keen interest in ensuring that Australians can be supported by a government that has a national economic plan that is driving increases in job numbers, Mr Speaker, increases in economic growth and in fact leading the advanced world when it comes to economic growth, Mr Speaker, and we will continue to do that with the policies and commitments that we outline in the budget this year and continue to pass through the parliament, Mr Speaker. But in particular, in addition to ensuring that we ensure the government lives within its means, you need to drive policies that improve productivity. And we have heard in this place about the lawlessness and the thuggery and the militant trade unions that today have had a very bad day because the Australian Building and Construction Commission Bill has been passed in the other place, Mr Speaker, which will ensure that the rule of law will return to our building and construction sites. And this is an important productivity improvement. This is something that is good news for the million Australians who work in the Australian construction industry. It is why our enterprise tax plan is designed to particularly support small businesses so they can give Australians working in those businesses more hours, more opportunities to earn more to ensure that they can support their own standards of living. That's why we have taken into this place the enterprise tax plan, which is also opposed by those opposite. In addition to that, Mr Speaker, by getting the budget under control, by ensuring that we get expenditure under control, and that we have had over $20 billion already of measures, Mr Speaker, half of those on expenditure measures, Mr Speaker, passed through the parliament, means we are getting on with the job. We also have to protect the integrity of the tax base. And it was about this time last year when those opposite voted against tax integrity measures which would ensure that multinationals paid their fair share of tax. That anniversary comes up on the 2nd of December when those opposite voted against multinationals paying their fair share of tax, And in this parliament, in this week, they're standing up for the rights of foreign workers with the Federated Union of Foreign Workers representatives who sits opposite, Mr Speaker. Those opposite wanted to protect multinationals for paying their fair share of tax, and now they want foreign workers to pay a lower rate of tax than Australian workers do, Mr Speaker, because an Australian today, on an average employee's wage, pays an average rate of tax of 23.8%. Under their policy, a backpacker, a foreign worker coming to this country, will pay an average rate of tax of 10.5%. So they want Australians to pay twice the rate of tax of a backpacker to pay for their foreign workers' tax cut, Mr Speaker. That's not how you run a strong economy for Australian workers.
The Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister rule out appointing Senator Brandis to a diplomatic or judicial post before the next election?
The Prime Minister has the call.
I knew that the member for Isaac's enmity towards Senator Brandis was an obsession. I didn't realise it was infectious.
The members on my left. Members on my left. The member for Denison has the call. Members on my left will cease interjecting. The member for Denison has the call.
Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, thank you for your time last week and for allowing me to brief you on the proposal for a Tasmanian A-League football team. Obviously, a Tasmanian football team would be a wonderful rallying point for the community, inject millions of dollars into the economy, establish soccer as the only true national football code and boost TV audiences. Prime Minister, do you share Tasmania's enthusiasm for this project, and what commitment can you make to support the venture, and in particular the modest improvements to North Hobart Oval that would underpin this very exciting endeavour?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, I can see that that in the honourable member's mind's eye, the Wilkie Wanderers are about to take off. And I acknowledge his keen interest in attracting a Tasmanian A-League football team, and also the interest of the Premier. So perhaps there'll be a competition between Wilkie's Wanderers and Hodgman's Harriers as the names for such a team. There's no doubt that soccer is a large and growing force in Australia. And the honourable member knows well the question of which football teams will form part of the A-League expansion is a matter for the Football Federation of Australia. Now, I'm advised that the FFA will be providing all interested parties with more details of the framework for this expansion in the first quarter of next year. So I encourage the honourable member to continue his advocacy for an A-League team in Tasmania. And, Mr Speaker, like the honourable member and all honourable members, I believe, we understand that sport and local infrastructure, the infrastructure that supports sport and communities, provides a wonderful rallying point. And that's why we are supporting local infrastructure in Tasmania. Just last week, the Minister for Regional Development, Senator Nash, announced the new Building Better Regions Fund, providing $297 million for local infrastructure and community initiatives. The North Hobart Oval improvements, which the honourable member has referred to, is eligible for the Building Better Regions Fund, and indeed is the type of project the fund aims to support. Applications for the fund open in January next year. So, Mr Speaker, we're investing heavily in the infrastructure Tasmania needs to boost productivity and deliver the jobs growth that the state requires. We're investing over $2.1 billion to enhance Tasmania's status as the global hub for Antarctic research, and Hobart as our strategic gateway to East Antarctica. That includes $38 million extending the Hobart International Airport runway to support the Air Force's heavy lift capability, and our new icebreaker, a custom-built ship, is due to arrive in 2020. We've also made a number of other vital investments, $400 million towards the upgrade of the Midland Highway, generating more than 250 jobs, another $60 million for Tranche 2 irrigation projects managed by Tasmanian Irrigation, $60 million in freight rail revitalisation, $26 million to upgrade the Brooker Highway. And, Mr Speaker, as you know, as the honourable member knows, we're also contributing $150 million to relocate and expand the University of Tasmania's campuses in Burnie and Launceston. So we are supporting a strong and exciting economic future for all Tasmanians.
Just before I call the member for Berowra, I'd just like to inform the House we have present in the chamber this afternoon a delegation from Papua New Guinea, led by the Minister for Works and Implementation, the Honourable Francis Awisa. On behalf of the House, I extend a very warm welcome to you. The member for Berowra.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is for the Minister for Defence Industry, representing the Minister for Employment. Will the Minister outline how the Australian Building and Construction Commission will help restore the rule of law on building sites across the country?
The Minister for Defence Industry, representing the Minister for Employment.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Berowra for his question. And today is a red-letter day for the Turnbull government, for the Australian economy, for the Australian Parliament, because the Australian Building and Construction Commission, first created by the member for Warringah when he was the Minister for Employment many years ago, has now been brought back into existence by the member for Wentworth, and this is a very signature achievement on our part. The last time that the ABCC was in existence, the member for Berowra might like to know, productivity in building and construction increased by 16.5%, and consumers saved $7.5 billion to their hip pocket because of the ABCC helping cleaning up building and construction sites. And the Minister for Employment, Senator Cash, deserves our absolute congratulations for the terrific job she has done in steering through the Senate a bill that's been defeated twice by the previous Senate in the previous Parliament, that many people said could not be achieved, that was the source of the double dissolution election, and this government steadfastly, sensibly, methodically got the bill through along with the Registered Organisations Commission. And the Leader of the Opposition, on the other hand, never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity, Mr Speaker. He missed the opportunity, a phrase that might well be known to the member for Berowra. He missed the opportunity on the Registered Organisations Commission, where he could have been standing up for the workers rather than the union bosses, and now he's missed an opportunity to stand up to the CFMEU, to show that he's not a patsy of the CFMEU. And he's missed that opportunity because he has $11 million worth of reasons why he sticks to the CFMEU like glue. It is another example of the failure, the abject failure of leadership of the Leader of the Opposition, making him quite unfit to be Prime Minister of Australia.
The member for Sydney.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. During the 2013 election, the Liberals promised they were on a unity ticket with Labor on school funding. After that election, the Liberals cut $30 billion from schools. Given data released today shows that Australia's results in school science and maths have flatlined, doesn't this prove that this Liberal government should put an end to its chaos and finally properly fund Australian schools?
The Minister for Immigration and Border Protection. Minister for Immigration and Border Protection will cease interjecting. The Prime Minister has the call.
Yes, I thank the honourable member for a question. As the honourable member is aware, the government is delivering record levels of school funding, the highest levels of school funding of any federal government. Now, we know, however, and we should be extremely concerned by the fall in our comparative rankings in maths and science revealed in the report today. This is we have in maths slipped since 2011 10 places for Year 4 from 18th to 28th, 5 places for Year 8 from 12th to 17th. In science, we've slipped 5 places for Year 8 from 12th to 17th, remained steady at 25th. Now, this is a much-needed wake-up call. But it is important for honourable members to recognise that during that period of that fall in relative performance, we have been spending more money every single year. The reality is this, that we cannot keep on managing school education in the same way that we have in the past. We need to change the way the money is spent. The reality is we're spending more, but we're getting worse outcomes. And what the Labor Party says is spend even more. Spend even more. They are not prepared to recognise that we need to invest in programs that will deliver better results. Now, we are focused on that very need. We are seeking to address these failures or these declines in performance. We've got a back-to-basics focus on more teachers specialising in literacy and numeracy. I hear sighs from members opposite. They're not, literacy and numeracy, that's what those tests are about, I'd remind honourable members opposite. We are falling behind in that area. We've got to focus on it. We're ensuring more teachers are qualified to teach STEM subjects. We're ensuring that students complete a maths or science subject as a prerequisite to get a tertiary ranking, and we're setting minimum literacy and numeracy standards for Year 12s. Mr Speaker, I'd cite the Grattan report on this subject released just this week, which says, and I quote, "Money alone cannot create a school system that gives every Australian child a fair chance in life. It must be well spent." And we'd recall what Ken Boston said, a member of the Gonski panel. The solution to Australia's education problem is not pouring more money into education, but redistributing the existing funding strategically to address the things that matter in the schools that need it. And that is our commitment to do just that.
The member for Menzies.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Industry, Innovation and Science. Will the minister update the House on how the Australian Building and Construction Commission will assist Australian industry, promote investment and deliver jobs for hard-working Australians? And how does this compare to alternative approaches that would hurt industry and jeopardise jobs?
The Minister for Industry, Innovation and Science.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I want to thank the member for Menzies, who, along with many other members of this House and all of the members on our side, has long stood against union thuggery and in favour of the passage of the ABCC legislation. And the reason why is because when you look at our third largest industry, construction, and if you allow lawlessness, which is the approach which has been encouraged and fostered by the voting record of those on that side of the House, then you allow project insecurity to proceed, you allow higher costs to proceed, and as a consequence you have lower job numbers. So this legislation which is passed today is about project security, it's about the rule of law, and above all else it's about more jobs for workers. So there are two very different approaches. You can either support the rule of law and more jobs in the construction sector, or you can oppose it, which they have done consistently. And why does it matter? Let's look at a couple of case studies. What we see in Brisbane is that they even allowed intimidation by the CFMEU in a project for homeless people, a project to provide security for those who are homeless. The Brisbane Common Ground project, which was heard in a case before the federal court, where the court found the actions of the CFMEU amounted to a deliberate stratagem, found this, that a subcontractor who was not allied with the union asked, "What are the consequences to my business if I bring my boys on site?" A CFMEU official replied, "You want to know what the consequences are? You would be committing industrial suicide." End quote. That's the sort of intimidation that we set out to end. That's the sort of intimidation to which they turned a blind eye with their vote in the Senate today. They should be absolutely ashamed of standing by whilst intimidation gets the green light on their watch. But it gets worse than that. The Pacific Fair shopping centres are home to many retail businesses on the Gold Coast. What we have is a CFMEU official goes into the work shed of a subcontractor which wasn't unionised, throws all the gear out, takes the lunches out of the fridge, throws the lunches out, and then when asked by the subcontractors if they can go in, if they can put their lunches in, get out of the shed, you scab. You're an expletive-deleted, extravagant expletive-deleted piece of excrement, mate. That's what you are. And then he goes on, but wait, you can put Neil's stuff in the fridge. Why would you put Neil's stuff in the fridge? Because Neil was a union member. At the end of the day, they stand for outright intimidation and thuggery. We stand for the rule of law and God. That's why we passed the legislation today.
The member for Gorton.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks for that. Very kind of you. Mr Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Yesterday in question time, the Prime Minister said the reason he sold out of Cayman Islands Vulture Fund was because his investment advisor told him to. Can the Prime Minister confirm that the fact the Vulture Fund profited from the suffering of vulnerable people was not a consideration? And is this why the Prime Minister stubbornly refuses to sell his investments in 7-Eleven, a company which is notorious for exploiting workers?
Member for Gilmore will cease interjecting. The Prime Minister has the call.
Mr Speaker, I addressed this issue yesterday, but I'm reminded by the question from the honourable member that unless he's made some changes recently, his own member's interest disclosure does not disclose where his superannuation is invested at all. Now, of course, if it is invested, as I suspect it might be, Mr Speaker, in Cbus, if it is invested in Cbus, then he would know that that fund has many investments in funds that manage distressed assets. But perhaps what the honourable member should do is update his members' register so that he actually discloses where his superannuation is invested.
The member for Macmillan.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Immigration and Border Protection. Will the Minister update the House on the importance of ensuring the 457 visa program acts as a supplement to and not a substitute for Australian workers? What are the risks associated with taking an alternative approach?
Good question. The Minister for Immigration and Border Protection.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for his question. Look, as we come toward Christmas, Australians will be thinking about this parliamentary year. They'll be thinking about the performance of the Leader of the Opposition. They'll be talking about whether they believe that this Leader of the Opposition is a trustworthy individual and whether his character determines if he could be properly considered to be the leader of this country. And you know what, Mr Speaker, I think we have demonstrated at every turn during this parliamentary year that this Leader of the Opposition, on every test, he fails the basic question of trust, because he says outside of this parliament that he is supporting Australian workers, that he wants to put Australian workers first. Yet we find out when he was the employment minister, he signed a secret deal with fast food companies, including McDonald's, to allow hundreds of workers in to displace Australian workers. And worse than that, he then said, to provide some sort of cover, that no, he was bringing workers in to work in the mines. That it was the mining boom, 457 worker numbers spiked because he was bringing workers in to work in the mines, but he was found out. He was found out and he failed the character test yet again, Mr Speaker. Now, the difficulty is that it goes beyond that for this Leader of the Opposition, because he's also, as we find out this week, signing other deals. He's signing other deals and he's consorting, as it turns out, through his CFMEU links with criminals and thugs, people that have been convicted of criminal offences, and that is the reality of this Leader of the Opposition.
The Minister will resume his seat. The Minister will cease interjecting him. I've asked him to resume his seat. The member for Sydney will not compound the situation. The Manager of Opposition Business.
Mr Speaker,
I'm trying to hear the Manager of Opposition Business. The member for Lingiari is warned. The Manager of Opposition Business.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. If that wasn't an imputation against a member of parliament for an improper motive, I don't know what was. He should
Manager
be
of
sat
Opposition
down.
Business will resume his seat. The minister is reflecting on the Leader of the Opposition. The practice and the standing orders are very clear. It's not a question of what the minister might think to be the case. Members cannot reflect on each other in this chamber, and they cannot reflect on senators. The minister will withdraw.
Mr Speaker, I'm happy to withdraw. Let me go to the substantive part of this point. Now, there are 100 people within the CFMEU who have been hauled before royal commissions or have been scrutinised because of their illegal practices. That is the reality. Now, the CFMEU has donated $11 million to the Labor Party. $11 million. There are many people who sit behind this Leader of the Opposition who are affiliated very closely with the CFMEU, and there are many people who would call themselves a friend of this Leader of the Opposition who are very intricately involved in the senior levels of the CFMEU. I will let the Australian public make their own judgment about this Leader of the Opposition. But we have seen when it comes to 457 visas, when it comes to this leader saying before the election that he would be on a unity ticket with this government in relation to border protection matters, you cannot take him at his word. There is nothing that this Leader of the Opposition says that he truly believes in, and he will say anything at all to the Australian people just to take this office, and he is not worthy on any test, Mr Speaker, to become Prime Minister of this country.
The member for McEwen will withdraw. The Manager of Opposition Business has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Social Services. Will the minister confirm that yesterday he wrote to me in his capacity as Minister for Social Services, stating that he would refuse to table certain documents asked about in question time on the basis the WA government asserted legal privilege over those documents, even though the minister was no longer a member of the WA government when he received them?
The minister has the call.
Mr Speaker, I thank the member for his question. As a matter of background, and as was noted in the Attorney-General's statement, I spoke with the Attorney-General, the Honourable George Brandis, on 3 March 2016. And the terms of that conversation are very accurately described by the Attorney-General in his statement, where he notes that I relayed my own knowledge, my background knowledge of the West Australian Government's attempt to end the Bell winding up. I also offered a view that a statutory scheme to bring the winding up to a swifter conclusion and with a better return to creditors was in principle a good thing. I did note to him in that conversation that I had not been involved in any discussions between Mr Hockey's office and West Australian ministers, and that I had not, at that time, the resources to form a view on the constitutional revenue aspects of the legislation. The reason I went to see Attorney-General George Brandis was because, as also noted in the Attorney-General's statement, on 2 March 2016, my office had received an email from the West Australian State Solicitor. That contained a summary briefing and slideshow of the history of the Bell matter, as well as copies of an exchange of letters between Dr Nahan and Mr Hockey. I did not pass those documents on to any of my federal colleagues or anyone outside my office. Rather, because the issue was outside my portfolio responsibilities, I considered that the best course was to inform Attorney-General Brandis, which I did on 3 March 2016. I informed him that I thought it was advisable that he contact the West Australian Attorney-General directly, which I now understand he did the next day. I did not provide any documents to Attorney-General George Brandis, considering it appropriate that he receive any views of the West Australian Attorney-General directly from him. When I spoke to Ms O'Dwyer on 4 March 2016, it was similarly to put to her that as Minister for Small Business and Assistant Treasurer, it might be advisable for her to contact the West Australian Attorney-General, which again I understand she did the next day. I understand that yesterday correspondence was sent to Attorney-General George Brandis from Michael Mission the Attorney-General of Western Australia. I'm informed that in that correspondence, the West Australian Government considered that the documents that were provided to me on 2 March 2016 contained repetitions of material relating to the Bell litigation, which I was previously apprised of in my former role as Attorney-General for Western Australia and Treasurer for Western Australia, and that the West Australian Government asserts legal professional privilege over the documents, as well as claiming a public interest immunity against their production in present and future legal proceedings.
The member for Isaacs. The member for Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs. Will the Minister advise the House on the importance of strong leadership in dealing with international security issues? Is the Minister aware of any alternative approach that would jeopardise Australia's international relationships?
The Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for Moore for his question. Australia's national interest is best served by developing strong relationships with our major partners and allies, particularly on the economic front, because that also underpins our strategic and security interests. And the China-Australia Free Trade Agreement is a case in point. It has great economic benefits for Australia, but it also has strategic benefits as we deepen our relationship with China. Now, the Leader of the Opposition's hypocrisy and his troubled relationship with the truth are well known to this chamber and beyond, no more so than in the case of the China Free Trade Agreement. For members will recall that the Leader of the Opposition endorsed a disgraceful, dishonest, xenophobic, anti-China campaign run by the union movement to destroy the China Free Trade Agreement. Indeed, the lies and the dishonesty in this anti-China Free Trade Agreement campaign was so profound that the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade had to put out a fact sheet pointing out the falsity of the claims made by the unions that were backed by the Leader of the Opposition. The claim that there would be unrestricted importation of Chinese workers, false. The claim that there would be unskilled Chinese electricians on Australian work sites, all this was false. But, Mr. Speaker, not content with risking the relationship in this way, and it was denounced by no less than Bob Hawke, who said it threatened the relationship with China, then we had the Leader of the Opposition's incoherent, incomprehensible strategies on the South China Sea, again risking our relationship. Then, of course, endorsing the behaviour of Senator Dastyari and his cash for policy behaviour. But, Mr. Speaker, I do give credit to the Leader of the Opposition. It appears that he wants to make amends. So apparently he's appointed a special envoy to rebuild the relationship with China. So off went the Deputy Leader of the Opposition in the Senate, Senator Don Farrell, last night to a major diplomatic event in Canberra, and all the diplomatic heavies were there, the ambassadors and the high commissioners, and up stood Senator Don Farrell on behalf of the Leader of the Opposition and toasted to the China-Australia relationship. Problem was he was in the Japanese embassy. Problem was it was an event to honour the Japanese Emperor's birthday. Now, Mr. Speaker, that is called a major breach of protocol. Might I suggest that the Leader of the Opposition spend the Christmas holidays on a global apology tour?
The Manager of Opposition Business.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. My question's again to the Minister for Social Services. I refer to the minister's previous answer. The WA Treasurer told his parliament, and I quote, "We contacted the then Assistant Minister to the Prime Minister, Honourable Christian Porter, who knows a lot about this issue. We put together the draft bill, we showed it to him and we showed it to the Commonwealth. We got a letter from the Commonwealth saying that it supported the action. We would not have proceeded without that support." Why does the WA government provide a different account to what the minister just provided? Can the minister now outline his entire involvement in the Bell Group matter, which is the subject matter of his letter?
The Minister for Social Services.
Thank the member for the question, Mr Speaker. And obviously I've noted comments that have been made publicly by the West Australian Treasurer, Mike Nahan. Obviously, when this matter became a matter of public note, I searched my own recollection and cross-referenced that with my diary. My absolute best recollection, which is supported by my recourse to my diary, is that there was a meeting with the West Australian Treasurer, Mike Nahan, on 5 February 2015. We discussed a range of issues, and I meet with Mike Nahan somewhat often. My recollection is that at that meeting he noted that the WA government was considering a legislative course to resolve the Bell litigation. 1 month later, on 18 March 2015, at this person's request, I met with Mr Rod Whittier here at Parliament House. He is the Managing Director of the Insurance Commission of WA. At that meeting, he provided me with an overview of the circumstances pursuant to which the WA government was considering a proposed legislative course to resolve the Bell litigation. And again, having cross-referenced my own memory with a search of my diary, my best recollection is that I did not receive any further information or have any further meetings specifically regarding the Bell legislation until the receipt of that email that in my previous question I've described on 2 March 2016. So 2 March 2016, my office received the email that I've described from the West Australian State Solicitor's Office, and those circumstances have been the subject of an accurate summary by the Attorney-General George Brandis and the subject of the response of my last answer. And I'll just note further that, as I indicated in my conversation with Senator Brandis on 3 March 2016, I had not been involved in any discussions with Mr Hockey's office and Western Australian ministers.
The member for Jagga Jagga is now warned. The member for Parkes has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Agriculture and Water Resources. Will the Deputy Prime Minister outline to the House what measures the government has taken to support the agricultural sector and hard-working regional Australians, and how does this compare to other approaches?
The Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question and note his long experience in the agricultural sector. We have done so much to support the agricultural sector, and that support is seen in the record turnaround we've had. Record cattle prices, record sheep prices, record pork prices. We've had record prices in sugar. We've made sure that we've opened up 3 new free trade agreements. We have 9 new live animal destinations. We have record numbers and record value of live cattle going overseas. And we also, on the back of this, support it with infrastructure, real infrastructure, $2.5 billion worth of dams infrastructure that we're now promoting and moving forward. Or telecommunications, where we put 499 funds for 499 mobile phone towers and a further 125 which were promised during the election. We've also put money on the table for the inland rail, something that just never ever got anywhere under the previous administration. Never happened anywhere under the previous administration. And now we've made sure that with our investment into the balance sheet of the ARTC, that this major piece of nation-building infrastructure is constructed so as to build a corridor of commerce through regional Victoria, through regional New South Wales, through regional Queensland. We've put money on the table and have started the process of the South West Loddon Pipeline, the McAllister Irrigation District upgrade, Dungowan Dam for $75 million to further expand that. Rookwood Weir, $130 million we put on the table for that, and we saw the completion of Chaffey Dam on time and on budget after getting the approvals through and putting further money on the table for that as well. We have started the $1.6 billion upgrade, of the Toowoomba Range crossing, and we've launched the Skymaster satellite, which is connecting 2,000 remote regional customers a week. And you asked if there's any alternate policies. Well, we have one that reflects the approach of the Australian Labor Party, and of course that is the backpackers tax. Where we have seen that what they intend to do to the agricultural sector and the agricultural workforce is what they did, the same as what they did to the live cattle trade, to completely destroy it. Even though there was when a reasonable negotiation was made from the member for Lilly, the former Treasurer's position of 32.5%,
We went about putting money on the table so we had a period of time so that we could negotiate a proper outcome. But who destroys that? Who has only venom in their heart for regional Australia? Who is nothing but a wrecker? Who can't you trust? Who can't you trust? Well, the member for Maribyrnong cannot be trusted. The member for Maribyrnong cannot be trusted to look after regional people. And that's the only time he's let the member for Hunter off the leash. He lets the member for Hunter off the leash, and it's complete and utter devastation for regional Australians.
The Manager of Opposition Business.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs. I refer to ongoing concerns about asbestos entering the Australian construction industry through illegal imports. Has the Minister had any discussions with her international counterparts about a treaty to combat the trafficking of asbestos? And if so, has the Minister taken any advice from her department about how to manage any conflicts of interest, noting her well-established advocacy for asbestos companies over the years?
The Minister for Industry, Innovation and Science.
I am actually very happy to take this, given that I lived opposite those folk whilst they put the Pink Bats program into action, whilst they sat silent whilst 4 young men lost their lives and did nothing, whilst they sat on their hands, and whilst we had inferior goods coming in from China. And so your history, their history on this matter is a history of shame, of inaction and of disgrace. By contrast, when we heard about this, we immediately sought advice, we immediately sought action, and
Member for Isaacs
you are the last person. You are the last person from your role in the home insulation program to show any form of piety, any sort of concern, after the practised inaction and serious look what real things happen on your watch.
The Minister will resume his seat. The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order.
Mr Speaker, on direct relevance, I can understand them not wanting to talk about the conflicts of interest on asbestos for the Minister for Foreign Affairs, but that was the question.
The Minister for Industry, Innovation and Science has concluded his answer. The Leader of the House.
Mr Speaker, that is a disgraceful slur by the Manager of Opposition Business, and he should withdraw it.
I didn't hear the Manager. Yes. Whether it was said at the dispatch box, the Leader of the House would appreciate that even when things are said at the dispatch box, if there's loud interjections on both sides, and this is not a critical point I make of the Minister for Industry, Innovation and Science, but he was responding to some interjections as well. If the Manager of Opposition Business has said something unparliamentary in the interests of the House, I'd ask him to withdraw. No, I don't think the Leader of the House was referring to the question. He was referring to something you said as you finished your point of order. The Manager of Opposition Business.
Mr Speaker,
No, members on my right, if they wish me to deal with this, they'll cease interjecting, otherwise we'll just have to move on.
I refers to the question being about conflicts of interest, which it was.
The Manager of Opposition Business will resume his seat. We'll need to move on to the next question. Of course, it's open to any member, if they claim to have been misrepresented in any way, to seek the call at the end of question time or to use other forms of the House. I'm waiting for the next question. The member for Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Veterans Affairs. Will the Minister update the House on the measures the government is implementing to improve the mental health of our Australian Defence Force members and veterans?
The Minister for Veterans Affairs.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the member for Gilmore for her question and note her ongoing concern for the welfare and well-being of the veterans in her electorate. Mr Speaker, today the government released the preliminary findings of the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare's study, Estimation of Incidents of Suicide in Ex-Serving Australian Defence Force Personnel. The figures released today are the first accurate, robust data ever produced on the incidence of suicide amongst the serving, reserve and ex-serving populations. Mr Speaker, one suicide is one too many, and the government is committed to addressing suicide in our community. This is the start of an ongoing long-term project that will help us better understand the extent of the incidence of suicide in the defence community and inform our efforts to ensure the people who need help can get it. The AIHW study found that between 2001 and 2014, there were 292 certified suicide deaths among people with at least 1 day of ADF service since 2001. Of these, 84 occurred in the serving full-time population, 66 occurred in the reserve population, 142 occurred in the ex-serving population, 272 were men and 20 were women. When compared with the Australian men demographically, the incidence of suicide was 53% lower for men serving full-time in the ADF, 46% lower for men in the reserve ADF and 13% higher for ex-serving men. In the wider community, suicide is the leading cause of death for Australians aged 15 to 44. Men make up 75% of all suicides. It is a problem we all need to confront. Mr Speaker, the government is acting. In the past 6 months, we have implemented non-liability health care for ADF members and veterans. This means that any man or woman who has served for a single day within the Defence Forces is eligible for treatment for depression, for anxiety, for PTSD, for alcohol abuse or substance abuse. It's free and it is uncapped. In the first 3 months since this has been implemented, over 1,000 people have taken up this help. We can and are doing more to treat mental health issues within our defence community. But this issue is something that all of us need to do everything we can to address.
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.
I thank the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker. The Minister for Social Services.
I might seat leave.